I hope everyone's okay to be recorded. Great. Well, cool. Well, yeah, and if you guys want to turn your video off now or leave it on, it doesn't matter. It does help me because we're so small, we can probably get through this faster. But sometimes we've had like 20 people on when I have like two classes in a row. Um, but now basically this is kind of a looser format. But I'm gonna go through, I'm literally gonna go through some of the different steps here in the online learning. Um, some are easy, but there's some more like especially the snow science stuff we'll go into a bit deeper and answer questions about and or if any questions you all have. Does anyone have any questions up front that they or stuff that didn't make sense to them or they want to talk about more?
Yeah, I'm kind of just curious about um, lower incline stuff that has like real small, patchy spots that could be considered avalanche terrain. Um, and what you really consider safe terrain. But I'm sure that'll probably come up a lot easier to explain in the field days.
Yes, that is exactly what they're for. But that one is I think I have a thing. Did you see a section here on the avalanche terrain exposure scale?
Yep.
So that's a super good question, and that is the bulk of it's harder on there, but basically what you described is somewhere that's overall relatively low angle, but there are a few little maybe there's little rolls or cliffs or creeks that are steep enough, not very big. So that would be loosely classified as simple terrain. That's mainly where we'll be in class. It means there's lots of routes and options to avoid it, and get around it. But it's still not there. There's no chance. Um,
Sweet.
yeah. So that's the terminology used. There's simple, challenging, complex. We can go through that again. And unfortunately, where we are, there's no maps, not many maps yet. But we can still talk about how to identify that. And that's
Yeah.
a super good question.
Sweet. Yeah, I think I'm pretty clear with the scale and everything. I think just like relating that to like real world scenarios is kind of the big thing that I didn't get from the pre learning.
Sure, we will. That is what we'll do Saturday and Sunday.
Sweet. Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean Friday. We're going Friday and Saturday this time. Yeah. Well, well, great. Well, yeah, what if I just I'll do a quick review. Remember, we are here in this is all Avalanche classes in America, all official ones that are in a structure have this structure. We're doing a level one class right here, and then Avalanche Rescue. We have them on the same level because you don't have to do one before the other. In general, if people have the time, we like people to do a level one first because the main thing about Avalanche is you don't want to get in them in the first place. You may see all these extreme skiing videos and snowmobile videos of people outriding avalanches or getting caught. That's a rare exception. Those video and film crews have helicopters there waiting with EMTs on site and like 10 rescuers there. When you're in the backcountry, the average person doesn't have that stuff. You have two or three people. So that's kind of the point of level one is awareness and avoiding it and identifying the terrain and managing your group in the terrain. And we do cover basic rescue. And level one too is made to not take over and over again. We get a lot of people that took level one like 10 years and they're like, well, I want to do a little bit of training. It's travel costs and time off work to go to do another 3-day course for level one again or level two. And that's where the rescue days come in. And all of you are signed up for that anyways. So where the avalanche rescue comes in is it we really don't go far at all in the avalanche rescue day versus especially our second day of the level one we're snowmobiling out 5 or 6 miles. You're going to ski tour out there and come back. Avalanche rescue we're just going to hike half mile or maybe a mile and do a bunch of exercises. And what's in the level one class we just cover simple one person burials and beacon checkpoints and things. As we're in the avalanche rescue we cover multiple burials is the main thing, more advanced things like some post-patient care, um, how to do deep burials or find people that don't have beacons a little bit. We cover all that stuff and a lot more theory and rescue. And also, like, say y'all do this year, and then 2 or 3 years go by, and you're like, wow, I haven't taken a class in a while. And also, if you've been traveling in the backcountry safely, you turn on your beacons, and we'll teach you how to do a trailhead check, and then you never use them. Like, you actually don't do um, rescue if you're traveling safely, but it's a skill that can perish. So that's why came up with this 1 day rescue course, so you can take it over and over again every year or two to get refreshed. Because if you haven't pulled out your beacon and used it, no matter how good you are, even myself, over summer, you forget how to use it. So that's where the rescue comes. It's made to take over and over again. And then the level two, we get more into snow science and a lot of things, and dealing with situations, excuse me, when you don't have a forecast. For example, maybe you go on a hut trip, and sure, you have the forecast in Colorado, um, when you leave, but if you're out there for 4 days and you're on a phone range and internet, you can't get a forecast. So you have to make observations and kind of project that into the future. So that's what a lot of the level two is about, and a lot more snow science, and more advanced more advanced and more detail on all the different subjects. Is the recreational level two, and this what you're all on here is the recreational track so far. But there's also the professional track, which still starts the same. To level one and avalanche rescue, all the same. But then say like Eden, it sounds like Eden. Maybe you want to be a patroller or something someday. Because in fact, Eden, do you know Hunter Archer and some of those guys? Maybe like Tucker True. I think there's some other lifties that took the class this year. Are there?
Yeah, I actually got a recommendation from Hunter to take the course.
Yeah, and so assuming you're on the same track as him, maybe you want to
Mm-hmm.
be lifty. So you want to apply to be a lifty. You don't need the professional avalanche one to be a lifty. Or sorry, not, but I mean a ski patroller. But that's where the pro one's made for. So say if you take level one in rescue this year as you're doing Eden, and then you get a job as a patroller next year or the year after, they'll probably encourage you to go do the pro one, and pro one's like a 5 day course and like $3,000 or whatever. So it's no small difference between professional one and recreational level two. But that's the difference, and that's more managing snow, working as doing snow control, because that's one of the differences. Backcountry skiers going for fun, we want to travel through the terrain and we want to get turns for fun, and that's why there's a split. As we're a professional avalanche worker, you need to do really good mainly snow pits and paperwork to record for liability. That's kind of what Pro One is, and there is traveling in it as well. That's why we divide it, because there's a lot of people that want to go for fun, but they don't want to dig holes all the time, which is fair enough. We will dig holes and cover it briefly, but that's the difference there. And I've done all these myself. And Pro Avalanche SAR is specific to SAR team members. They kind of have to go. It's how to manage things. So that's how we fit into this everywhere. And then also, hang on, just so you know as well, because there's a lot of acronyms. Has anyone heard of ARI and of A3 of CIC and AAI? If you've heard these things, ARI is usually the most popular one, but in America, just to make sure, everything actually goes under the American Avalanche Association. You can see this. This is where I got the diagram. I've gone through a year-long process to get all these slides and everything approved, to be used as classes and get my instructors improved. So we're an approved provider. Um, and one thing that's different, if you hear the term area, it's Aries a franchise, and they're kind of like the McDonald's of Avalanche education. It's more like, I've done this 20 years. I wrote this whole online learning system. I make all my slides and all the videos, or a lot of the stuff, um, as where if I just wanted to pay $1,000 a year or some huge fee to use Aries, um, that's what I could. That's the difference. So, but it is still especially in Colorado, it's the most widely known. But taking a level one from us is the same as taking a level one from Aries. So say you do level one with us, and then you move or just want to try something different, and you go to take a level two or whatever from an area provider, it's all accepted, or vice versa. If someone took their area level one, it's equivalent to ours, and then you can get in the same thing, because it does come up a lot. But you can see here, Aries gone through the same process to get all their books, but we're right here next to them, Avalanche Savvy. Of course, we're smaller. We're only 10 people. We're not like 100 or 200 things. But one difference too is sometimes in area, a lot of the instructors, they kind of just pay $1,000 and they do a 5 day instructor course, and they may have no experience other than 20 days of their own in the backcountry, as where all the head guides that work for me, like Anthony, is an 8 year experienced ski patroller at Loveland. Um, there's another guy, Chris, that is another 8 year, and he's actually the second in charge of the snow safety at Loveland. And a lot of people, when you're from Steamboat's so massive, think, what's the big deal about Loveland? Even though Loveland's a lot smaller, over half of Loveland is literally avalanche terrain. It's inside the boundary, but that's what the ski patrol does. So even though Loveland's small, they've got a ton of avalanche terrain inside that they have to manage and control. So they have tons of experience. As we're until we opened Mahogany Ridge here, there was just the chutes, like 3 paths. That's it. So those guys are super experienced and knowledgeable, and they're also on like the CRAD dog teams. And there's another my snowmobile guy Kevin. He's on this. He's the snowmobile specialist for the Star team here in Route County. So we're not just instructors. Like we are instructors, but we're also Avalanche. They can relate this to the things. And like Eden, and if patrol is something you want to get into, you're going to spend 2 days with Anthony, and he can tell you all about ski patrolling. So you can ask those questions direct, which is what I think is pretty cool about us and what makes us different. So that's all. It all fits together. What else do we got? But you hear on avalanche.org, um, if you didn't click the links here, this website called avalanche.org, if you only remember one website out of this, it's avalanche.org. And the reason for that is if you remember avalanche.org for North America anywhere, for the US, you can find everything else. You can find providers like me. You can find the forecast. Um, we are in Colorado. So like here's the homepage of avalanche.org, and obviously we want to get the forecast. I bet you guys have already at least seen the forecast before, right? Sounds like you at least heard of the forecast, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
And we'll get into it. But one thing is that's only good for Colorado, but especially like Colin and Kyle, if you guys want to get into snowmobiling, not very far. Like we're right here. In fact, we're gonna be right here, right near the Wyoming border. These patches here, this is like the snowy range and everything up here, there is literally no forecast whatsoever. They do have a common like an information sharing center, but there's no paid professionals like there are here. So that's why when we're teaching these classes, you guys are kind of local or Colorado's. We do get people. I have people from Minnesota coming for snowmobile classes, so that's why we teach. Here's how to get your other forecasts. Or hey, you want to go into Utah, the Uinta is here. This is where you get the forecast. So we kind of teach you to travel as well instead of just teaching you to one local zone. And we are going to get all into CIC, but it's just good to know this stuff. We like want to teach you how to fish, not just to give you a fish. And another cool thing about avalanche.org is this encyclopedia. There may be a lot of terms you come across in all this, and if you ever hear a term, there's tons of them, and sometimes several terms mean the same thing. This is where you can go to refer to figure it out. You don't need to remember everything, especially for level 1. If you're in Pro 1 for Eden, doing that in a year or two, that's a different story. However, for most people, we may not remember things. Like one I always like to look up here is facets. Facets is a general type of crystal, and there's different subclasses, but you can look it up right here if you don't remember. Especially like if you're reading the forecast, there may be different things, and we'll see some facets out there this weekend. This is what they look like in general. So that's a good resource there. And the American Avalanche Association, like Eden, especially if you're thinking even about being a patroller, one thing you could do is they have different levels of membership. I'm a professional member. I've been a professional member for 10 years or whatever. But even just joining this at $35 a year, or Colin and Kyle, if you like it, you can join and you get emails, and they have this really cool magazine they put out. You don't have to do it by any means, but Eden, if you're thinking of being patrol, it would help do this. Then you start learning about all the conferences and things, and then say you join patrol, and after 2 years of a patroller, you can be an affiliate member, and then you can be pro members, etc. Et so just good stuff, especially if you're thinking of going pro Eden. This will help you. Like if you go to make an application for an A3 for a pro one, just being a general member, like, oh yeah, you're kind of switched onto that. But it's an option. You don't have to do that going for fun. And just to make sure, everyone has or is going to have an avalanche shovel, not just a snow shovel, but an avalanche shovel, a beacon less than 5 years old, and a probe. Right? Everyone's got those. Are gonna
Yeah.
get.
Yep.
Great, great. And then make sure, it seems subtle, you don't need a fancy expensive backpack, but we do want all this stuff, especially the shovel and the probe, inside a backpack. A lot of people think, oh, just put especially the probe on the outside, but then like I can just walk by and yank it out, or you can fall and it can slide down the hill. And imagine being an avalanche that could come out. So one of the key things, if you don't right now, is get a backpack. It could be one from Walmart, but that everything fits inside. Don't have anything sticking out, unless there are certain snowmobile backpacks that have really tight straps. You may see and fixtures for the outside. Um, but if it's not one of those, just make sure everything fits inside your backpack. Um, and then some optional things you'll hear a lot about. I'm assuming none of you guys have an airbag. Does anyone have an airbag?
I do not.
Great. And that's okay if you don't. Kyle and Colin, do you guys have an airbag?
No, we don't.
No, and it's fine. You'll see them a lot. They are extremely popular and trendy these days. More for the snowmobile crowd. But but still that's on it. That's why I call them bonus gear. If you don't have it, it's completely fine. If you didn't have a beacon shovel and probe, we might not be able to take you out there on the weekend. But the airbag, we talk about them because you'll see them. But the theory behind those is you if you get caught in an avalanche and you have time, you pull a cord and it inflates a giant balloon and it makes you more buoyant so you can float on top of the avalanche and not be buried in theory. And they do work about 60% of the time, but they're not infallible. But that's what their bonus. One thing those don't do is they don't help your friends. That's why the beacon, shovel, and probe and all three together are so important for everyone in the group to have. Because if someone has an airbag and you have a beacon, shovel, and probe, you still can't find them and they can't find you. That's why it's a bonus personal gear. It helps you, but it doesn't help the other people in your group. Radios are getting cheaper. They're another optional thing. If you can get one, we recommend them. Or if you have them, bring them. Does anyone have a radio yet?
I don't.
Okay.
No, but I was wondering, with the like FRS, I saw the diagram versus like the UVF or the VHF stuff. And I was wondering, like, can you just buy any radio? We were looking at I don't know if you're familiar with like Baofangs. Um, but yeah, what do you have to have a specific like style of radio to make sure it doesn't interfere with any of the vegan stuff?
Good question. All electronics might interfere. It is okay to have electronics. You just need to know what does. But in general, like the FRS is like one you can go to Walmart and buy one as long as it has like the 40 channels. That's FRS and Bowfangs. Like if you want to go that far, those are fancier. They can do different private channels that you need like licenses for, and you can program them and they have better range. But when we say radio, we just mean like your average Motorola walkie-talkie, or there's in the backcountry, there's some of the ones that are better for winter are Oxbow or BCA. They've got better waterproof ones and the batteries last in the cold, but still those channels, they're like the same as a walkie-talkie. Like if you go to Best Buy and you buy a Motorola pack, and some of those, I've seen some people with these Motorola ones, they're not trendy in the backcountry, but they're waterproof. And there's even some you can send like text messages between the little radios. As long as it's like FRS is like the term, but that's where you don't need a license and you don't have to program it. Like, and by program I mean like if you buy a Motorola and then I have an Oxbow one and you put 411 in it, it's the same. The Bowfangs can be and they're more expensive, but you can program in your selectors. You can get real fine and you can go off the standard channels to where you need licenses. I mean, you can physically program and use any channel, but then technically you need like an FCC license. So I'd say if you want to go that far, you could, but you don't need that fancy. And still, it's not required. It's like a recommendation, though. We're saying this is like bonus stuff. If you don't have it,
Yeah, but just making sure, like, if I have like a high powered radio in my bag, it's if I get buried, it's not going to interfere with my beacon signal, will it?
sure.
Or
As long as it's more, we'll get into that. As long as it's more than 20 centimeters away, it shouldn't.
okay, cool, cool.
Yeah, and we will get into that. We more get into that on the rescue day, but there's a general rule for any electronics. It's 20 and 50. And remember, the beacons have two modes. They have search, and then they have send. And the beacons are way more sensitive to interference when they're in search mode. So if you are buried, you're not in search mode, right? And basically, if your beacon's on the front of your body and your radio or whatever is in the back, that's more than 20 centimeters. So it's not going to have effect. But what really makes a difference is like this Phoenix X5 watch or Phoenix 8X watch, if I hold my beacon in this hand, it'll cut the range in half. It's not these things stop it, but they do affect it. But what I remember is I just don't hold my beacon in my left hand. I hold it in my right hand, or it's going to get.
Gotcha.
And
Thank you.
yeah, and don't worry, we'll get way more into this on Sunday in the rescue class. But yeah, super good questions. Let's see. Oh yeah, did everyone watch these videos here?
Yes.
Great, great. And remember, we've got nine. There's nine general problems of for avalanches. In Colorado, we almost always have a persistent slab, and then in Steamboat, when we get tons of powder, that's basically a storm slab. And other ones like loose wet slabs or wet slabs that can be spring skiing, and everything. And more when, like, say you're doing a 14er and you leave at 2 a.m. and then you hike up till 8 a.m. And it's frozen and you have crampons on, and then you want to strap on your board or your skis and you want to ski down right at that magic moment between like 9 and 10 when there's like 1 to 2 inches of corn snow on it. But then 3 hours later, if you take too long or you took too long to hike up, you get ankle deep slush or even higher. And that's when you might get these things called the wet slab problem. So these are all our kind of all of our problems. But then let's go straight into our forecast. We don't want that one. Yeah, let's go in here. And so here we're in CAIC, and this is our area here. And one thing before we even get into these different areas, these areas may or may not change shape. And that's one different thing about the Colorado Avalanche Information Center and our zones versus Wyoming and the other ones. It's cool, but it's also kind of fancy and somewhat misleading because you may think, oh, hey, I'm just going to click in this blob here, especially when you live here because Steamboat's always in it. But sometimes it's usually right around here. There's a split, and they can be different ratings, which is good because Mother Nature doesn't follow our polygons and our counties and our states. So just be aware of that. You may just be getting, or even if you're in Steamboat, you may think, oh, we're here, get this for the forecast. But then especially for Eden, if you live here, or if you guys get snowmobiles and you're going to North Route, especially this area over here may be different. So you don't always want to assume that you just click anywhere in the shape. Today, it's all the same. It may not be that case. And then,
And where are the field days?
sure, they're going to be right near where the outpost was. Remember the outpost where you guys were volunteering?
Yeah. Both of them are.
Yeah, and but the outpost is right in here, but on the poker, you didn't go on the poker run, but the poker went like in a 50-mile loop up here. The outpost is right about here, and we're going to go out here to the west of Steamboat Lake. We're probably not gonna we're not gonna meet at the outpost in the morning, but the first day is gonna be at the Steamboat Lake State Park. We do a lot of theory and stuff the first day, and it's not the most exciting ski terrain in there, but we cover all our rescue and all our theory and things, all our talking, because especially in our classes, the second day we snowmobile you out, and it's all go go go, and we go out to we're basically on the side of Sand Mountain. If you remembered, if you looked west from the outpost parking lot, you'd see this giant jagged peak with big chutes. We don't go in those chutes, but that's Sand Mountain, and we go to the north side of that. And we shuttle it, and then we basically ski tour most of the day on that second day. So but it's still all we're still all parking near Steamboat Lake. Does that help? Oh, you're muted. I'll take silence.
Thank you.
Silence is compliance. Yeah, so that's where we'll be. And that would be that's half the time a different forecast zone over there. So looking at today's forecast, uh, some things you always want to take note of when you're reading a forecast is when it was made. And I can't emphasize enough, here in Colorado, we're very lucky. They sometimes do forecasts twice a day, and they're always every day. And even then, once the resorts close, they're usually doing forecasts into May, surely till the end of April. When you go other places, if you travel, even just across the border, and I've said that one spot in Wyoming doesn't have any forecast, or in the Tetons, or Sealy Lake, Montana is a popular place for snowmobilers. They may only have forecasts every 3 days or so, or they may only be on the weekends. So it's important, even though in Colorado you get them every day, make sure, remember, because we're teaching you to travel too, look at when the forecast was, because it may change, or it may have been a few days old or out of date. So just remember to look at when the forecast was made. This one is today at 4:30. Um, and we can see here we've got like the different elevation bands. And so for today we had considerable up high. That was probably due to all the new snow and some wind. And then we've got moderate in the middle elevation band or near tree line and below tree line. And you can see it's pretty cool over here. They actually project out as well. They're saying this is Thursday because they made this at 4:30. And then Friday, it's actually going to go down. It's going to be moderate at the upper elevations and low at the lower elevations. So some good things to note. And then I'll just go through. This is like the summary. It's kind of just the big gist. If you're just going for fun and you're not trying to be extreme, you can usually just get away with reading this little summary here, looking at the ratings for the elevation and the different problems. There's more detail in here. We'll get to that. But basically, today they're saying you'll most likely trigger an avalanche on high elevation slopes, below ridge lines, and along gully walls where you find snow drifts. These drifts may be firm and rounded and can crack when you travel on them. Head to lower angle slopes or those holding soft to none wind affected powder snow for safe riding. I think they did. This is a typo here. Soft wind affected snow for safer riding. So yeah, this is not very detailed. There are other times they'll talk about a lot of things. This is fairly straightforward today. Um, and then let's look at the problems. It's shown us we have two problems here. We've got a wind slab and a persistent slab. Basically, in Colorado, there is always, between December and April, there is always a persistent slab. And that means there's a weaker layer of snow, usually near the ground, not necessarily always. That's usually made of facets, and we'll get more into that on the snow. Facets are a weak crystal, but basically the that layer's there and it just stays there and it doesn't change throughout the season because we have a shallow snowpack here in Colorado. As That's a big contrast to the Northwest or Alaska. They get 20 feet of snow, and there's various reasons it all changes, which we'll get into later in tonight's talk. But the persistent slab, the one trouble with that in Colorado too is there can be no signs of it. Obviously, if it's stormed 10 feet and you drive to Hans Peak, or even they've got the chutes closed and there's natural avalanches, it's obvious there's avalanche danger. Trouble with persistent slabs, there may be no visible signs of them except for digging pits and doing tests for weeks, maybe a month or two, but they can still happen. They're very hard. They're not obvious, different from wind slabs or storm slabs. Um, and right now, these persistent slabs are from the northwest around to the northeast at all elevations, and then they're at the upper elevations and middle elevations on the east slope. So that's where we'd look out for that. And the wind slab problem is everywhere from the north around to the south. So here's one. If we have a wind slab problem from the north all through the east, all the way into the south, which direction do you think the wind came from? Did it come from the north, from the west, from the east? Who can guess which direction the wind came from?
The West.
Yes. Good call. Yeah. So that means the wind's coming from the west over here. Remember these uh, rose diagrams are what they called, or they're kind of like looking straight down on Hans Peak. Imagine Hans Peak, the very top's here in the middle, and this is the base. So the wind's coming this way and taking the snow and pushing it all around to the other side, stripping it off the west-facing side that faces the wind and moving that snow onto the other side and making it thicker and deeper. Um, so that's how those work. We actually don't get wind slabs as much here in the Northwest compared to like Loveland or Berthoud Pass. But however, we do this weekend. Um, they're more prevalent when you get above tree line, and we don't have that much terrain here, so we don't get them that often, but we do this time. And we can see these are likely, and they're, if they do happen, they will be a large to small size. And if you ever wonder what these different things mean, you can click here. And get a good description. Like this one's likelihood is the description of the chance of encountering a particular avalanche problem. It combines spatial distribution of the problem and the sensitivity or ease of triggering to the avalanche. The distribution indicates how likely you are to encounter the problem in the highlighted terrain. The sensitivity indicates how easy it is to trigger them when you encounter them. So that's a cool thing. They have these little hints here in the size. They go through all that here. But you can see we have these wind slabs are likely, and our persistent slab is unlikely. However, the one trouble with persistent slabs is you don't expect them to happen, and if they do go at this point, they might be actually very large. So that's why they're kind of scary. They're hard to predict, hard to see, and if they do go, they're going to go pretty big. Let's see, and they have nice descriptions for each of these problems here. Let's read this one. Wind slab avalanches release naturally during wind events and be triggered for up to a week after a wind event. They form in lee and cross-loaded terrain features. Avoid them by sticking to wind-sheltered or wind-scoured areas. Now here's two terms you may or may not know. And this isn't me, even though it says lee, it's not me. Does anyone know what the lee slope and the cross-loaded mean? Anybody? Silence is compliance. Anybody?
Yeah. So, what is leeward that west side of this slope where the wind kind of comes up, and then windward is the backside where the wind flows down, or is that the other way around?
The other way around. Yep. So the windward side, if for this wind slab problem, if like we're looking down on Hans Peak, the windward side, if the wind is coming from the west facing aspect of the wind of the mountain of Hans Peak, for example, is the windward side, and the lee side is the opposite side. So if the wind's coming from the west, the east facing slopes are the windward side. And this is great. I'm not mad that you don't know. That's why we're here. And then also, what about cross loading? Can you guess what that means, or does anybody know? Or if you don't know, it's all right. Just say so.
Yeah, not sure on that one.
Well, great. I could tell you, but let's do a little exercise in how to use the encyclopedia. Let's use this because these terms will come up. So here I've put in cross. I've looked up cross loaded in the encyclopedia. And then can you see, here these blue? Can everyone see the blue arrows? By the way, can you see them on the screen share?
Yeah.
Great. You can see here, obviously this is a ridge or a mountain, but the wind is blowing across these slopes. So cross-loading means that the wind's coming from the left. Who knows if it's northeast, west, or south right now? But you can see here, the wind's coming from this way, and you can see it's blowing across the slope versus up and over or from the back and over. So if you were a skier up here at the top, skiing down your skier's right-hand side would have a high chance of an avalanche problem being there. However, the left side, the skier's left, is scoured because the wind took it and put it on the other side. So you can see all like the skier's right-hand side of these gullies, they're filled in, yet the skier's left-hand side is all rocky and stuff. So cross-loading means it's moved across a face as opposed to straight up and over and down. And sometimes especially in the front range, you'll get cornices right up here. I mean, Kyle, if you're from Denver, you've been to Loveland or A Basin. This kind of happens a lot up there. And as you drive up, when you're driving I-70 towards Loveland, you've got
Yeah.
Sneffels and all that. What they're like half rock and then half snow. That's what's happening. The wind's blowing across them. So that's what cross-loading means.
So, what would be like the ideal line down something like that where you just avoid a cross-loaded slope? So, I mean, if one side's rocky, that's no good. The other side has a bunch of snow, which could cause an avalanche, but that's no good. And then the gully between them is like a path for the run out. So is there really just no good options there?
That's a good point. There's not usually. Because if you're in the middle of it, if the safest, and this is really threading the fine. We recommend not going at all like this. You would just remember the wind slab problem said it would go in a week. That's the best time to try these. Like wait till that wind slab problem goes away, because the trouble here is you would have if you didn't want to trigger the wind slab, you would be safest down in the center of the slab. You see where my mouse is pointing here? And that's where it'll be thicker. But the trouble is, if it's thicker, you have less chance of triggering a weak layer. But imagine these things like lenses that sure it's thick in the middle, but as you get towards the edges where it's rocky, it gets thinner. But that means that weak layer is closer to the surface, so it's easier to trigger, and you can often trigger these as you try and enter them or you get near the sides. So if you think, oh, go near the side, well, one, you might hit a rock, but two, you might trigger the avalanche. And in all this terrain work, this photo here, this one in particular, this is like complex terrain right here. You know, if you get caught damage here, you're gonna get swept over these cliffs. You know, there's gonna be massive problems. These are big chutes. This is complex terrain, which we wouldn't recommend going in almost at all unless it's low danger. But if there were cross loading on this day, would be we would definitely not recommend skiing it. But maybe you just want to get to the summit. Well, then you just hike up. It is fine to go up the rocks. You know, maybe there's some lower angle terrain on the other side, or you just want to summit a 14er. You don't care if you ski down or not. Sure, you can stay on the rocks. Um, but yeah, it's difficult. But with that, we'd say, just recommend not, especially in terrain in this photo. However, if you're in some low angle bowls, there's not the Loveland Basin itself, but the basin over that you get to from the highway where it's lower angle, sure, if you have a wind slab problem and it's cross loaded, there's lots of space to move around in that kind of terrain. More the cross loading and the wind slab tell you where it is, and you need to pick appropriate terrain to avoid it. And this photo has complex terrain. There's basically no space to avoid it anywhere in there.
Gotcha. So, but like on a 1 day, yeah, you get out there, everything to the eye looks good. That would still be something that you would run or would be able to.
In this photo here, this one,
Yeah.
no, no. If I read the forecast and it said there was a wind slab problem, I would
Or,
stay.
but no, if it was a one, basically like the lowest danger, and there was no wind slap problem, would that be a day
Oh
to get up
yes,
like that?
to go into complex terrain. Yes, yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, great. Let's go back here. What else do we got? Um, Here, let's just go through the description of persistence. Can you guys read this from there? Or is it too small because of my screen? I'll go through it anyways.
Yeah,
Persistence
we can read it.
can be triggered days to weeks after the last storm. They often propagate across and beyond terrain features that would otherwise confine wind and storm slab avalanches. Some cases they can be triggered remotely from low angle terrain or adjacent slopes. You need to give wide buffers and margins of safety to address the uncertainty in these. Yeah, and these persistent slabs, you can trigger them from 1,000 feet away. We were on a big ski tour one year between Aspen and Crest Butte, and we triggered one from a mile away. These persistent slabs are pretty scary. That's why if these problems are there, you need to be extra careful. And they can be harder to trigger. However, like where these two avalanche problems overlap, and a good example would be, say you wanted to ski the north side of Hans Peak, you want to take a north side line, you have the persistent slab problem everywhere and the wind slab. So maybe you kick off a small wind slab, but that adds another 300 or 400 pounds, maybe 1,000 pounds. And then that breaks down and causes enough force to break down through and trigger the persistent slab, and you can wind up with a huge avalanche. Um, so that's how these things can combine and compound the problems. And we'll go over identifying, like, are we on a north aspect or an east aspect and what elevation out there in the field.
So
Okay.
with these persistent slabs, and anything from like moderate to considerable danger, there's really no way to avoid. You just got to avoid all avalanche terrain on those aspects that it specifies here. Would that be your uh, kind of thought?
Yes. Yep. Especially if the danger, like right now, is considerable. Remember, we have the overall danger rating and then we have the problems. We could still have a persistent slab problem, but have a low danger rating.
Mm-hmm.
We usually would, but that's when you take in the rating itself and the problems. And yet, basically, at this one, especially in this north to northeast aspect because we have all these problems overlapping. We wouldn't want to go on avalanche train whatsoever. Um,
Perfect.
yeah, yeah.
Thank
And
you.
well, sure, sure. And then more in here. We won't do all this, but you can read a more detailed discussion. This is more like we'll get into detail this on the day or in a level 2 class, but you can get more information. And you can actually also get weather forecasts here. When you go for the afternoon or ski tour for a day, the weather forecasts make less of a difference because you can't get that far in a day unless you're on a snowmobile. But if you're doing like a hut trip, where you're a couple days, that's where the forecasts matter more and more, projecting out into the next few days. Like, sure, maybe it's low danger when you leave on a hut trip, but the second day there's a call for a big storm, then it's going to change the danger and make it worse. That's where the weather forecasts make more of a difference. And you can get all that in here, but also like any sort of weather, the U.S. Weather Service, or I use Weather Underground. Any of those things are good. But if you want to look at one place and get all the information quick, this is a good spot. And you can also go back into the in time, and you can see the danger ratings. You can see them going back in time for the history. It should load here. You can see how it's changed over time.
Is looking at the history useful in making a determination?
For good question. And I'd say that more matters if you're just going for a 3 to 4 hour ski tour, which is what the bulk of everyone does. I'd say no. But it can be good for history, or if you forget and if you it's more of a nerdy thing to go for fun for a day for 3 hours. No, but if you like this stuff, which it sounds like you guys do, and if Eden's going to be a patroller, it is kind of cool to go back in time and see how the forecasts evolve over time. Like, look, how did a storm happen? Or, or it can be good. We're all in Steamboat. It sounds like everyone rides up. Eden lives here. You guys are up here a lot, but maybe you're going somewhere totally new. Maybe you're going down here, um, into is this one here? Oh, yeah, that's outside. Oh yeah, we're back in time. Say you're going to a different area and you want to look up how it's changed, and or did you see that how the this is split into three different things here, but here it goes into two different ones. It can be maybe you're gonna travel somewhere and you want to see the history. It can be good. It's more of a nerdy thing. It depends on how much you want to get it. But to just go for fun, like we're in a recreational class. We're not being forecasters. You're not gonna PhD in snow science. To go for fun, it's a cool thing to do, but it's not needed. But you can know it's there if you want.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see what's next. We kind of beat that and don't worry, we're gonna go in the forecast. We're gonna go into that in the field and apply it. One key thing to not forget though too is that most avalanche accidents happen in moderate and or considerable. When it's low, they don't happen too much, and when it's high and extreme, no one goes out. And I swear this is a newer statistic, but for the longest time, they were still saying most avalanche accidents actually happen in the moderate danger rating, not just considerable, because it's less danger. And that's when everyone remember we're talking about not avalanches but avalanche accidents. So you need avalanches plus people to get an avalanche accident. So moderates when everyone's out there, like, well, yeah, there's new snow. It's been a couple days since the storm or whatever. Let's get out there, and it's not extreme. But fun enough, that's when a lot of avalanche accidents happen. So yeah, here was this is from CIC. They're saying they're lumping moderate and considerable together, but the 80% of the fatalities occur when danger is moderate and considerable. So it's a key thing, and we're in considerable danger right now, at upper elevations, anyways. What else here?
So if it's low, we're good to go, pretty much.
Well, low danger doesn't mean no danger. It doesn't mean there can't be an avalanche. It means there's way less chance of there being an avalanche.
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. Low danger doesn't mean no danger. It means less. And the scale is exponential. It does kind of ramp up. Like in those videos, if you remember, they've got green and then the yellow for moderate, then orange considerable, and then red for high and then extreme. It's an exponential scale. But yeah, there's way less chance when it's lower. Um, but they can still happen.
Is the scale based off the specific problems?
It can be, yes, that is a excellent question. I think you'll love to go to a recreation level 2 class. we don't know. We don't cover that. There's a thing called the conceptual a model of avalanche hazard of how you make the rating.
Uh,
Um, it is involved in that, but that might be a bit much for tonight and for this class. But if you want to nag Anthony about that when you're out in the field, do that. He loves to talk about that. Yeah,
cool.
it does. But there's a whole complex thing with it. Um, yeah, that's like forecaster pro level questions there. Maybe you could just go to that one right after this.
Yeah.
It sounds you guys like these. Some people just want to ride for fun. But yeah, let's if it's okay, we'll table that till the weekend and get through some of this other stuff. Um, the one thing I want you to kind of get this model of how you're making the decisions of when and where to go when we're out there on the field, or even to plan your trips. One thing we always want to do is start with the terrain. If you remember from the videos, they gave this triangle with the person in the middle, and there's terrain at the bottom, and then weather and snowpack. Um, it's how we as people interact with all those elements when we go and how you go and where you go, determine your risk in the backcountry. But one thing that's different from the terrain versus the weather and the snowpack is the terrain is predictable and stable. The terrain basically doesn't change. Yeah, sure, there might be a landslide every 100 years, but an avalanche slope is an avalanche slope, and it doesn't matter if there's snow on it or not. An avalanche path is an avalanche path. But then the avalanche danger is determined by what Mother Nature, what the weather put there, and how it made the snowpack and the layers in it. Um, so that's why I always like to start with terrain. Like basically, are you in avalanche terrain or are you underneath it? And remember the definition of avalanche terrain in its simplest form is just 30 degrees. If are you under 30 degrees or over 30 degrees? Because if you're under 30 degrees and you're not beneath anything steeper than that, there actually isn't a chance of an avalanche. That's how you can rule out avalanches now is 30 degrees, the most extreme rad terrain. No, but you can still get turns. It's like a blue run. Um, so you can still have fun out there. But it's important. Like we need to remember, are we an avalanche terrain or not? Then we go, hey, because if even if it's high danger, and if you have avalanche terrain that's less than 30 degrees, you can go anywhere you want, north, south, east, west, as long as you're not above 30 degrees, and you can't get an avalanche. There could be other problems. You might get hypothermia, but you can't get that. But then when you apply the forecast, the weather and the snow to, say you want to ski the north side of Hans Peak or Sand Mountain, you apply that and you're like, well, okay, there's two avalanche problems right now and considerable danger. Is it a good time to go on that north side? No. But if you remember, if we were to go back to those danger roses from the forecast, the east, especially in the southeast, really didn't have any problems, if I recall. So that's when you can determine your safety and how you can manage your risk by choosing your terrain on the day of you're trying to go. And then once we apply we know our terrain, it doesn't change. We apply our forecast for the day. Then we need to weigh up, well, okay, are we fit enough to do the thing we want to do? Or do we have the gear? Did someone forget their probe? More importantly, it's easy. Everyone messes up and forgets things. Those are on our human factors. Or is there someone sick? Can they handle it? Should we do this extreme thing today? Like if an accident does happen, can we handle it? It can be very stressful and tiring. Is the equipment up for it? Do you have the training? That's that third layer of applying how we manage our risk, our human factors, to on top of the snowpack and weather, which is on top of the terrain. And we'll dive more into the human factors and stuff later on. And some other things to consider too are like right here, we're sitting at home on our computers. We're all in Steamboat anyways, but you could be planning this from Denver. And when we're in like a pre-trip planning phase tonight. We're like 2 days ahead of when we're going to go on the snow. We call it kind of planning at the regional scale. For a class, because our class has to have permits of where we go. It's kind of predetermined the region we go to, but you could easily be sitting in um, Denver, and you could be like, well, we want to go ski touring, and I want to take my friend who's never ski toured before. We don't want to mess with avalanches at all. Well, here's a spot with low danger down here. Um, you know, these are things you can plan as a region at this level of pre-trip planning ahead of time. Or instead of coming here to Steamboat where it's considerable, you could actually go stay closer to home in the Front Range where there's less danger. So these are things to consider. Then, mountain valley scales like the morning of, so say, it was Wednesday, you said, okay, now we're going to Steamboat. we got a place to stay in Steamboat. So that usually means Buff Pass for a lot of people, or North Route County where we're going, or you can go to Rabbit Ears, or the Flat Tops from here. So that's the Mountain Valley. You're at least looking at the weather of the day in the forecast, within an hour or two's drive. And also if you pick a trailhead and you're going out there, and as you're driving to the trailhead, you can look at the peaks and the mountaintops, and you can observe with your own eyes, even if you don't have a weather forecast. Well, is the wind blowing? Is there high winds? Is there 3 feet of new snow, or is there no new snow? Is it 50 degrees out, or is it only 30 degrees out? You can use these things with your eyes over what you get on the internet ahead of time when we're assessing all these things, the terrain, the snowpack, and the weather, and the human factors at the mountain and valley scale. Because maybe randomly it snows an extra 3 feet on Friday night, even though we have class. Maybe we need to change our plans for Saturday because there's a bunch of new snow or something. Um, you can do that. And then once you've left your trailhead, left your parking lot, that's when you're always evaluating your terrain, your snowpack, and your weather and your human factors as you travel. Like if you're in a big flat field, oh, let's mess around. Let's not stay close. Let's spread out. But then if you see from a distance, if you see you're approaching some avalanche terrain, okay, let's get closer. Let's have a little meeting. Let's identify where we might need to cross it if we have to cross it, and we're going to cross it one at a time, obviously. Um, and that's checking in with the terrain, snowpack, weather, and human factors every few minutes, even if you're in the backcountry, because maybe you've hiked for 3 hours and someone got a blister with a new boot, and now they're slowing down, they're getting tired, they're not as aware, they're not going to be able to react as fast if you do cross the slope one at a time, and they happen to be the one, maybe they can't ski as well because they have a blister, or for whatever reason, all these factors, except for the terrain, your snowpack weather and human factors are always subject to change. And even the terrain changes depending on where you are in it, but it changes less. You can always count on it. But try and visualize this pyramid of terrain, snowpack and weather on top of it, and then your human factors. And then we're always doing that at the regional scale, like our pre-trip planning, then on our trailhead or the morning of at our mountain valley scale, and then at our slope scale. And this is a more detailed thing that we'll go over in the field, but it's a summary of that. We're always evaluating how dangerous is the terrain, how dangerous is the snowpack, applying that, and then our human factors and our skills. Can we handle that if anything goes wrong? Are we prepared for it? At any, a critical decision point can be when you leave the trailhead or picking a trailhead, or once we snowmobile out there and park, do we go to the left? Do we go to the right? Or is evaluating these things at different levels of detail. Anyways, I kind of beat that one for a bit. We've gone for an hour. Does anyone want to take a 5-minute water break or bathroom break? Why don't we do that?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, just take 5. So I have 7:05. Let's just come back at 7:10, and I'm gonna get some water and go to the bathroom, and you all do that too. Did we lose you there for a second, Eden?
Yeah, sorry, I think my Wi-Fi cut out. Am I back? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great.
It's Steamboat. That happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, sometimes.
We'll give those other guys a minute or two.
All right, we're back.
Great. All right. Okay. We may touch on things all the time, but now we just want to review terrain um in a little bit more detail. If you want to remember the simplest thing and you want to remember one number, 30 degrees is the magic number. If you are on terrain that's less than 30 degrees and you're not beneath anything over that, you actually can't get an avalanche. It's not physically possible unless it's very rare circumstances, or if you're in the northwest where it's very rainy and you get lots of water in the snowpack, they can occur actually down to 18 degrees, but you barely get them. But this is a good diagram. Here we've got our 30 degrees right here. And they're kind of relating that I still more consider 30 degrees a blue, but they're calling it a black diamond right there. Um, and here's where um, we get some different kinds. Here they're showing below 20 degrees, we can get slush flows in the Arctic and permafrost environments. Well, that's not us, and we're not going there. Um, but between 30 and 39 degrees, the slab avalanche probability rapidly increases with slope angle, and like 39 to 38 is like the prime angle to get an avalanche. But still, this between 34 and 45 is the most, and you can still get them down to 30. So there is variation in here, but especially going for fun, if you can just remember 30 degrees, that's kind of the dividing line in most of the 48 states, anyways, where you just can't get an avalanche. Because we want to give you certainty of where you can be safe, rather than threading the needle at looking at shady areas. Um, but another interesting thing is, who can guess why most avalanches still occur between 30 and 45 degrees, and why don't we get as many above 45 degrees? Can anyone guess?
Is it too steep so that snow is regularly falling off?
Exactly. That is exactly it. You still get really small avalanches, maybe, but it's so steep, and especially in Colorado, our snow is so light and fluffy, it doesn't stick. Like, especially around Steamboat, if it's over 30, 45 degrees, it's usually a rock and a cliff. However, with more snow, the cliffs can get covered up. Or like in maritime environments like the Northwest, the snow's wet enough and it'll stick to the faces. But if it does fall, it naturally falls and releases. So you might get little small sloughs, but you don't get big slab avalanches. There can be other dangers associated with skiing above 45 degrees, like cliffs and more. But for avalanches, they generally clear themselves out. Or if you watch like Alaska skiing videos, they're skiing these super steep lines and they do a turn, and a mini avalanche starts beneath their skis, but it doesn't break all around them. That's what you get our sloughs. But then they can create other hazards. So say you're skiing a steep 45-degree face and you've got sloughs coming down, that's a lot more mass. And then you hit a spot that's only 35 degrees. Your weight plus all that mass could then trigger a slab. It's a interesting problem. Not really applicable here, but that's how these avalanche problems can combine. But that's our magic number is 30 degrees. Um, and then we need to remember our aspects. That's just which side of the mountain you're on. Are you on the north side, the east side, the south side? You'll hear us out there. We're always going to be asking you, are we in avalanche terrain at the moment? Are we beneath it? What aspect are we on? And what elevation are we at? And then other small things with terrain are like terrain features and traps. An avalanche terrain trap is anything that can make the consequences of an avalanche worse. Say for example, we're in some simple terrain, but there's one little spot that looks like a really fun ski line, and we like, okay, you know what, the avalanche danger is low today. Let's go one at a time through that to be safe. But at the bottom, like a creek is a prime example. A small face, only 10 feet by 10 feet wide, a 10-foot by 10-foot slab, and only a foot deep, doesn't sound like much. But if there's a 3-foot deep creek and you flip in there upside down, maybe your legs are sticking out, but you're still buried up to your chest upside down. And if your friends aren't looking, you're alone, you can still die of an avalanche. So you don't necessarily need a big one. And in fact, a lot of recreational people skiing, they get killed in very small avalanches. The big things are easy to avoid. The big couloirs, it's obvious. It's the little small ones where you're not paying attention. Um, but you think, oh, it's not that bad. Why worry about it? Or you don't even realize it. You think, oh, it's the slope's only 8 feet high, but it's above a cliff or a run out. Um, and you haven't managed your group well. That's when the avalanche accidents happen. Um, and then down here we've got a summary of our scales of the avalanche terrain exposure scale. We've got simple, which is class 1, challenging, which is 2, and complex, which is 3. And you can see even without a map, we've got low exposure to avalanche hazards. That doesn't mean there's no hazards, it just means low exposure. It's mostly gentle slopes, open areas, minimal avalanche paths. It's suitable for beginners or those with limited avalanche training. Then we've got challenging. Class 2 is moderate exposure to avalanche hazards. It includes some steeper slopes, well-defined avalanche paths, and some terrain traps. It requires mid-level knowledge of avalanche safety, including the ability to assess conditions and choose safer routes. Um, and then complex is high exposure to avalanche hazards, features multiple overlapping avalanche paths, numerous terrain traps, and difficult escape routes. And you need advanced skills, experience, equipment to navigate safely. So for sure in this class, we're not going to complex terrain. Even in level 2 classes, the risk is just so high. Maybe in our own, or maybe like in a ski mountaineering class. But we'll definitely be in simple terrain. And depending on the conditions at the elevation we go, maybe we'll dabble in a little challenging terrain this weekend. And what I don't have on here is that this is like the definition of the scale and the Rolls Royce of this avalanche terrain exposure scale, which is America's slowly adopting, is having maps. And you can see one here. I've got one pulled up here. This is actually the Loveland ski area I'm circling right here. And you can see the I-70 tunnel goes underneath. Um, if you want to think of simple terrain as the green, just kind of relating a just like green, blue, black associate to your downhill skiing ability of where to go in a ski area, the green, blue, and black associate the terrain that's safe to go according to your avalanche training and skills. You can see, back to my point about the avalanche terrain is avalanche terrain, whether there's snow on it or not, or whether the ski patrol has controlled all the different layers. But you can see here inside Loveland Ski Area, up at the top here, this is complex terrain surrounded by some challenging terrain. The same with over here. There's actually a ton of avalanche terrain. And even here, the ptarmigan lift, I'm assuming everyone skied Loveland at least once, right? Maybe? Surely, Kyle.
No, never have actually.
Never? Oh, it's pretty rad. It's small but mighty. But even here at the top of this chairlift, there's an avalanche path that always goes, and you can take pictures of it. I see it go a couple times a year. Well, and the ski patrol triggers it, but it's right here in the middle of this green zone. So even because it's green doesn't mean there's no danger. It's just a lot. It's a smaller path area. And Anthony can tell you all about this. But I'm just trying to relate these scales to somewhere even inside a ski area. You can see it really well here, and you can see here once you go through the tunnel. Here we've got some extreme avalanche terrain. That's another rating we don't have to see too much, but it's above complex. The red here. Um, no, unfortunately, you can see as I zoom out, we don't have these maps everywhere. This is Onyx. If everyone did the downloading of all that um, in the pre-coursework, we have these maps in some places. We don't have them everywhere, but in place of them, we do have slope angle shading. We'll turn off the avalanche terrain exposure scale and then turn on slope angle shading. You can see its slope angle is, kind of the base definition of um, avalanche terrain, but it doesn't take into the other factors. But you can still see here a lot of the places that were complex terrain were very steep. So we can almost all digital maps these days have slope angle shading. So you can see here, yeah, if it's in the short is if it's red, that's over 30 degrees. Red or purple is over 30 degrees, and the green areas are less. But you can see here as we zoom in, this whole area here was all green in the 8th layer rating, but however, there's a few little red spots. So that's why it's taken into consideration. They do an average over there, but there's still, you can see, sure, these are little avalanche prone areas, but there's tons of space to get around them. However, if you're up here on top of this peak, there's almost no way down to ski except for the ridges, which are probably like really, really rocky. So we'll talk more about this. We'll do an exercise Friday afternoon of using all these maps. But these are some of the ways we can see and look ahead. And we do have slope angle shading up where we are. You can see we'll zoom in here. So we'll meet the first day. We're going to be at Steamboat Lake State Park on this little peninsula, I think. But then our second day, we're going to go out here. This is Sand Mountain. We're not going to be in this dangerous area, but we're going to be right here in the middle. This is Meaden Peak, and we'll be in between Meaden Peak and North Sand. This is North Sand Mountain here. So you can see we'll be near avalanche terrain and we'll be able to see it. However, we won't be in it. Oh, sorry, we'll be in this valley over here. Here's Meaden Peak, and we'll be in this valley here. So we'll be near it. There's some killer ski lines over here. We're gonna have a good time in there. And then I've even made this layer. I've circled, these are some areas like for classes we've specified. These are our complex areas, or in class we just can't go in here whatsoever because I may have other guides visiting from out of town. And hey, just don't even try and go in the areas. They're really hard. You have to know it really well locally to get in and out safely and everything. But we can be near it, and we'll be down in here and we can see all this stuff. Has everybody used digital maps or anything before?
Yeah, me and Colin have used Caltopo a fair bit, like hunting and backpacking.
Oh, great. So but yeah, and for a class, I think here in the homework, I've had you download Onyx. If you can get the free trial version, the reason we just emphasize Onyx a lot is for avalanche safety. It's the only digital map that has the 8th layer in it so far. Caltopo is also awesome. I use both, but I found the user interface for Caltopo just a little bit more clunky for beginners. But that's not saying Caltopo is bad or Gaia is bad. If you have one of those and you want to use that in your own time after class, go for it. Another thing though is I have these pre-made maps made out that you can download and you can get all this stuff on your phone. Like there's some key points here that we're
Yeah,
gonna.
we've got those.
Yeah, and so if after class you want to forget Onyx and you cancel your account, please do. But it makes it easy to share these things because like we'll go through a planning exercise on Friday afternoon. We're gonna meet here Saturday morning, follow this yellow line out here to this parking area, and that's where we're gonna park the snowmobiles, and then we're gonna tour around up in here. So that's a way to communicate like, hey guys, here, just get Onyx, get this thing. and you can see and you can look ahead where we're gonna go, especially this parking area, and then you could draw like potential lines and stuff um from here. So that's how these digital maps can be cool. And then you can even do things like here's the route. This route is the route to actually make it back to the outpost, and then this one goes from the outpost to here. But you can highlight these and you can see the elevation changes on the map. This is pretty cool. How high you're gonna go. Um, yeah, just cool stuff like that. So more on that on Friday afternoon. Um, this is a video. I'm pretty sure you guys watched all that. We don't need to go over that. This is the paper. If Kyle, you're asking a lot of like pro level questions. If you want to see the science behind these things, here's the link to the actual paper of this stuff. But you don't need to memorize that for this at all. One of the key things though is that even if you don't have a map and you don't have a digital map, if you're out there and you see avalanche paths, one of the biggest things to worry about is when they overlap, because whether you're skiing or snowmobiling, you could be in an avalanche, but then say these two people, they're waiting here off to the side out of either of these avalanche paths, then one person goes and gets caught. Then these two people come to rescue you, they're exposed to the second one at the same time. And that's kind of like the simple layman's determination of the difference between challenging terrain and complex terrain is multiple overlapping avalanche paths. And that's where a lot of avalanche accidents occurred, being able to identify this stuff. So just look out for those multiple overlapping avalanche paths. We'll talk about a few of those out there.
Yep. So in that scenario, with a 2-man team, I assume you just go for it for the rescue. But yeah, what would you do in a situation like this if you came across someone that's buried and within an additional path?
No, if it was high avalanche danger, I might not do the rescue, or you definitely wouldn't want to send everyone in there at the same time because then you could get everyone wiped out. Um, if we did decide at all to go and do the rescue, we would have one person go because you want someone waiting. If everyone's in there, you can get wiped out. And there's been 2 or 3 accidents the last few years of things like this happening. Someone gets caught in avalanche, they don't recognize that there's another avalanche path, and the entire group gets wiped out. Um, we'll talk more about that, especially on the rescue day, of how to handle these different scenarios. But no, I wouldn't. It would depend on the situation, but most likely, if they were underneath another avalanche path, if an avalanche just happened right here on the same day, and this path, there's a 90% chance it'll also happen right here, right next to it, and get caught. You might hold off on the rescue. And SAR, this is one thing SAR teams do is they evaluate: is it even safe to go do a rescue? Um, you have to weigh up those options. Um, but remember, and this by definition is the complex terrain, and we're saying almost always stay out of complex terrain unless it's low avalanche danger. So the point of this class is recognize this stuff and don't go in there in the first place.
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. Unless it's like low danger or something. But it's a tough decision. Like you don't want to do it. You don't want to not rescue someone, but if you're gonna put yourselves at risk, say you even have 3 people, one person's already buried, you send one, then another avalanche happens, then both people are in there, and even still with avalanches like this, just because the path ran, sometimes you can get hang fire and things coming down again on the same path. Um, so yeah, that's why it's best, especially multiple overlapping avalanche paths or complex terrain, another way to put it. Kind of want to we really recommend staying out of there unless it's low danger or you've got a lot more experience. Did anyone watch this video?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I did too.
It's one of my favorites. It's kind of a longer one, but that's a good one. We don't need to do that again. But zipping through here, we don't need to do the quiz. We've actually already covered this earlier, which is great. We will go into red flags. So if you remembered, or sorry, we'll take one step back. Here's like our Come on, little photo. It's not gonna let me expand. Um, but remember, I talked about the planning at different scales. Um, at our regional scale, our pre-trip planning, our mountain scale, and then our slope scale. We're looking at all these different things, in the pre-trip planning. What is the danger rating? Um, what's the weather forecast? And here's, when we're on the mountain scale or intermediate scale traveling to our thing, do we see snow falling? Are we confirming what we saw in the weather forecast, or is it different because it's not always the same? But once we're actually on the snow, like physically out there, there's some things called red flags. Um, that basically any of these red flags mean if we see these while we're out there, it means turn around and don't go there because sometimes the weather can change or the forecast is wrong. And we always want to use what we see in front of our face. Like if we're trying to evaluate terrain, if we measure a slope and it says it's 35, yet some map we had said it wasn't, what you see in front of your face always overrides the information you got from the internet beforehand or on a paper map. It's way more relevant. But one key sign of danger is recent avalanches. Like if one of your group gets caught, and in fact most avalanches are caused by the person or someone in their group. That's this thing that there's very high danger out there, and to not go on that particular aspect and elevation of slope if it's over 30 degrees again. Um, Other things that are red flags are woofing sounds. And a woof is basically a weak layer in the snowpack that has collapsed, but it wasn't on a slope steep enough to slide. So it's basically an avalanche that didn't slide. So if you hear those, and in fact, you can get those a lot around Steamboat. If you get out on Rabbiters even, and you might not have known what they are till now, but that's actually, there's weak layers, but they're just not on slopes steep enough to avalanche. So if you're hearing those though, on your way to go ski something that's over 30 degrees, that's a sign to like stop and or to at least not go to that avalanche train on that day whatsoever. A woof. And the same with shooting cracks. They're basically avalanches that kind of almost started but didn't get to propagate the whole way out into a slab. Other red flags for high avalanche danger are recent or ongoing heavy snowfall. That's basically more than like a centimeter an hour or 20 centimeters over 24 hours. That makes a storm slab. High winds, we already talked about that earlier. We have a wind slab problem. Winds, even the slightest wind, say 20 miles an hour, blowing for an hour or two, can take 1 inch of snow that fell from the sky, move it, and make 2 to 6 feet deep wind slabs on the leeward side of a slope. So wind can move fast. It's not as much of an issue up here in Steamboat, except we're seeing it right now. But if you ski Loveland Pass or Berthoud Pass above the tree line, wind has basically a constant effect there because the trees aren't there to slow it down. And then with rapid temperature changes, that's kind of like spring. We get freezing overnight still a lot of the time in Colorado, but even in summer it can get freezing at night. But during the day it's 50, maybe 70. Um, and that's related to climbing a 14er example. You leave at 2 a.m. and everything's frozen. You have to wear crampons to walk on the ice so you don't slip, even it's that slick. But 8 or 9, everything starts to thaw, or maybe it's suddenly it was 15 degrees overnight, and then suddenly it's now 70 degrees by 10 or 11 a.m. and the sun is just beating down on these slopes, and you've got over a foot of slush, and the slush is deeper than the top of your ski boot, and you're trying to ski or snowboard. That's a big sign that the significant warming has is going to cause wet slab avalanches, and it's going to melt, and it's basically just giant slush flows. um, they have no cohesion, and the water lubricates all those grains in there. So that's another thing to look out for. And beware of there are other times, you're trying to climb a 14. Maybe it's slightly cloudy and you don't have the sun and only goes up to 30 degrees. That could mean that you don't have that wet slip problem yet, and you maybe decide to go further because it's freezing and it's not loosening up, which is safe for avalanche danger. However, it might create a sliding ice danger, if you slip and fall without an ice axe. But then suddenly the clouds disappear and you're a mile into this huge slope or area that has tons of avalanche paths, and then you're suddenly surrounded by avalanche paths that could um, have wet slab avalanches. I just realized I didn't have my camera on. And then persistent weak layers, you can't always see these, but this is when we'll dig pits and help you identify persistent weak layers. That's one thing we can't see without digging, but they're huge and they're very common in Colorado. And then we have, same again, recent rainfall, similar to recent snowfall, recent rainfall. Rain, like I've mentioned, with the rapid temperature changes, water of any kind lubricates the snowpack. It makes it easier for those snow grains to flow and move and cause an avalanche. So any rain on snowpack is a giant red flag. In Colorado, we don't have it too much, but in the Northwest, they do, especially at lower elevations. So that's another sign that you want to look out for. And like if you see this stuff or you're experiencing it in the field, stay off avalanche terrain. All these things are like, hey, just chill out and stay less than 30 degrees. It doesn't mean don't go though. Still go, just stay less than 30 degrees. Like don't even try doing a small slope one at a time if you're seeing these red flags. I think this is a good video.
Hey, Craig Gordon here with the Forest Service Utah Avalanche Center. When I'm looking for clues of unstable snow, I like to keep it simple. 5 red flags. The first is recent avalanche activity. Yeah, if you're seeing avalanches on the same kinds of slopes you want to ride on, it's Mother Nature's freebie, the biggest clue to unstable snow. Second is going to be cracking or collapsing. Those collapsing sounds. Strong snow on weak snow. Whoomph, you hear the snowpack collapse. Another huge.
And can you guys hear that coming through?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, it's coming through.
Just making sure I hit
Red flag. Third is going to be strong winds. Remember, wind can move snow about 10 times faster than snow falling straight out of the sky. Fourth is going to be heavy snowfall, and that's an inch an hour or more, is a big red flag. And the fifth and final one is rapidly rising temperature. The snowpack can sometimes seem super complex. I like to keep it simple. I always fall back to the 5 red flags.
I like that one, just kind of sums those up. Are those making sense at least? I'll take silence as compliance. Yeah, so these are things, these overrule any plan we had or anything we thought before we left. Always look out for those, and we'll talk more about those while we're out there. Let's see. Here, yeah, we talked about Onyx and the maps already. Did everyone, Eden, were you able to get Onyx and get the folder here?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so you guys got all that covered. Now we'll get into the group management, which is what we're going to practice in person. And the short, which we've mentioned and is kind of obvious, travel one at a time through a piece of avalanche terrain. However, the key thing is we need to know how to identify that avalanche terrain, especially the small ones. So, traveling one at a time is great if we can identify it, if you have a map, or if you can recognize those things. So we're going to make sure we're out there on the field. This is kind of a lot of the meat of when we're out on the snow is using slope meters and angles, and estimating slopes to identify them, and then move one at a time, and how to put our people. Like here, this is an avalanche track, an obvious one. So we've got a rally point here on one side, a rally point at the other side, and we're going one at a time to cross it. And also, if something does go wrong, you do have got a few split seconds to try and get out of the way. And if you're going downhill on skis or in a snowmobile, you do have a slight chance of getting out of the way. So you want to have your escape routes planned. And you want to talk about that over here before you start crossing. And some other key things are, if you've identified some avalanche terrain and you think it's okay to ski it one at a time, and you need to do it, you want to make sure though that the entire group is watching. You don't want to have everyone having lunch with their packs strewn out, or it's Colorado, maybe they're off in the trees smoking a bowl. You don't want to have people doing that while you're the one out on the avalanche slope. You want to make sure you're all paying attention for skiers and splitboarders. We're usually trying to cross these when we're going down, so you're in downhill mode. But you want everyone to have their packs on too and buckled. You don't want to have like gloves off or helmets off sitting on the snow because you want to be able to react really fast to go start a rescue if needed once you've made sure it's safe. And then it's not just having everyone positioned at a good spot to start going across. Once you cross or someone crosses, you want them to be in a safe spot, and ideally they can look back and they can see. And ideally, when you do handle avalanche terrain, you want to make sure everyone can be within eyesight. You can't always, and that's where radios do come in handy a lot. They make it a lot easier to do this sorts of stuff if you have them, but they're not necessary. But still, the ideal thing is looking and seeing, because maybe you're skiing a longer avalanche path and the people at the top can only see halfway down, and then maybe there's a blind spot or there's no safe spot at the bottom to see and watch, and the people from the top can't see the whole way down. Maybe the avalanche happens and it's small, and you don't hear or know, and you're waiting around 5 minutes and you're like radioing, "Hey Larry, where are you?" And you get no response. Then you have to worry, and then people have to go out and be exposed in the avalanche path to go see if there even was one. So the best thing, especially at your all's level, at the starting level, is just try and keep everyone with an eyesight and in voice, and then you don't need the radios. You keep it tighter, and everything's a lot more obvious.
Are you kind of just always expecting an avalanche could happen and just trying to mitigate the risks when it does?
Well, it depends on the danger, but especially for recreational travelers, we want you to be able to identify the terrain from first. You got to know you're in it, because surprisingly, a lot of people get caught in avalanches and they didn't think they were even in avalanche terrain. It wasn't a big one; it was a small slope. So we need to identify it, and then if you identify any sort of avalanche terrain, regardless of the danger, we still want to go on it one at a time, right? At this level, and for most of the time, you don't want a whole bunch of people on a slope. That's what we're trying to say is, and it's no matter what the danger rating, if you see avalanche terrain or you're exposed to it, you want to go one at a time, and then it's those other danger ratings to determine if you're even going to go at all, or it's just to turn around.
Yeah, yeah.
You always want to be one at a time in an avalanche spot, and it's especially confusing because it's the smaller ones that don't seem like it. That's when someone's going to get caught and no one's going to be looking because you didn't think it was a big deal. You didn't think and stop that it was a big deal to have spotters and go one at a time. That's when say you look at some slope and you think, oh, there's no avalanche danger, and there's a very small piece, and you say, hey, let's just gang ski it. But then you're in a group of three, two are at the bottom 1,000 feet below someone, and someone else just goes a little bit further to the right or somewhere and hits this one sweet spot, get caught in an avalanche. Then the other people are at the bottom 1,000 feet, and 1,000 feet is going to take an hour to hike up, and that's you've lost your window of rescue. And that
Uh-huh.
So let's say we're going like one by one. Once in like you wouldn't have to transition and normally to like continue your line. You're kind of like linking up and skipping over some avalanche terrain. Would you transition if you're the first rider down back into your touring set so you can kind of get back there and be ready for the rescue? Or kind of what is your mindset there on transitioning and prepping for the rescue on case?
That's a good question, and the I don't want to try and dodge it, but it depends on the situation and what the risk was. Because sure, to be ultimately safe, if you have a group of three or four and you're skiing a longer line, you know, or maybe it's when the last person's there. You always have to weigh up the time factor and your other things, but ideally you just avoid it. But you say you're in a group of three, and the first person goes down, the second person still has someone that can do rescue from the top to get down quick. But say the second person comes down in a group of three, and then there's that last person that doesn't have anyone above them to get there quick. Depending on the avalanche danger of the day, you may want to be like, okay, well, yeah, let's skin up to be ready. But then again, that could take, a transition can take 20 minutes sometimes. And then you still have your uphill travel time. And that's how we need to weigh up, are basically just not going unless it's a little avalanche danger. Because if you're at that point and you're splitting hairs to do that, it's probably too dangerous to do in the head. So saving in that case of three people, you went and the third person's caught, you got two people at the bottom. Even if you're already in uphill mode, you still take, it could take a half an hour more to get up to someone if it's even 500 feet above you. It depends on the path. It all depends on like the size of the path and the situation. Because you only have a 20-minute window. If I should have that in there. You basically have a 20-minute window to rescue someone before they die of asphyxiation.
Yeah.
So, when you weigh up the time, that's when you got to weigh up the whole picture. Well, maybe if you're when you get to the point when you're splitting hairs about the stuff, it's like, well, maybe we shouldn't have just done it on that day. If you're that suspect that the avalanche might happen, why are you going there in the first place?
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so, yeah. So I hope that made sense. Um, and no one has the snowmobiler, so maybe we'll skip that. Or do you guys want to learn about the snowmobile safety stuff too?
I mean, we went over the modules.
Great.
Yeah, I was gonna say we already kind of covered it.
Great. And you're mostly skiing. That's great. Yeah, this is just review. Let's go into here. Here's a good diagram. Because here's what actually happens. Here's, even before I play this video, to get any sort of avalanche, we need to have a strong cohesive layer over a weak layer. There can be 80 reasons why there's a weak layer and a strong layer. You can get PhDs on it and identify crystals, but you don't actually have to do that to be safe to go out there for fun. That's like the difference between these recreational classes and the pro ones. But you just need to know weak layer of underneath hard layer. And this is a good diagram because here we have the ground. Here's the weak layer, and you can see this orange thing is like a bubble of deformation. No matter what you're doing, there's some sort of deformation in the snowpack happening. It's like micromillimeters, but if you deform the snowpack enough, and we call the bulb of deformation, if it hits that weak layer and triggers it, that's when you get an avalanche. So this is kind of the theory, and it also relates to how deep is the weak layer in the snow, or what we haven't talked about is what are you doing on the snow? Like, say we're in this case where we've determined it's like low avalanche danger. It is an avalanche path. We need to cross it. We're going to go one at a time, or maybe it's moderate. But then, are we going to ski or ride gently down it, or are we going to air to a cliff and drop 10 feet and cause this bulb of deformation to go twice as deep or three times as deep and trigger that weak layer? Or you're going to slash a hard turn, or in a snowmobile, are you going to try and floor it and trench where your snowmobiles can be 13 feet long? It's one thing if it's level and causing, a deformation to go down 2 or 3 feet. But then if you swing that thing down and do a wheelie, that chainsaw just went 10 feet down in the snow. And now that bulb of deformation has reached all the way down like 15 feet down in the snowpack that could trigger those weak layers and even more. So that's one thing to think about too. If you are needing to ride avalanche terrain, you want to ride it gently. You don't want to do big airs. You don't want to do backflips. You don't want to do hard slashes. You want to ski gently, and not try and trigger that weak layer. I think this one's pretty good. That's the short one. So it's not just how and when we go, it's how you go. What do I do here? Oh yeah, let's do this. So to get into some of the details as well, we're out there on the snow and we've identified an avalanche path and it's low or moderate danger, and we're figuring, okay, we're gonna go one at a time. One thing you want to do as soon as you, the person on the slope, know you're caught in an avalanche, or if someone sees it, you want to yell avalanche and or use radios and scream avalanche so everyone knows to be alert and start watching. And that's because avalanches kind of move like a wave in the ocean. If you've gone to the beach and gone surfing and you crash, the wave takes you down and then it actually spits you back up and then takes you back down and then spits you back up. Avalanches actually do the same thing. So that's why it's so important. We're all watching and having spotters and yelling, and we want to watch the avalanche while it's happening. The avalanche might last 30 seconds or a minute, maybe two even, but you want to watch it for several reasons. One is that if the person goes down, they might come back up. And if you see them reach the surface, even if they go back down again, at least you know where you last saw them. You don't have to search above that. You can eliminate all that terrain. If you saw them resurface, you can be like, okay, well, we definitely don't need to search above that. They're not higher than that. And also, especially with skiers and boarders, you might lose a glove or a mitten, or a snowmobile might get separated from the snowmobiler. Um, those things are all clues, and you want to have your eyes watching for all those because they can help you find the person. They can vary a little bit, but they tend to actually move in line with where the person's buried. So if you say an avalanche happens and someone's last seen point is here, then they go under, but then you see a pole here and then a glove here, you can kind of trace those lines and it can help narrow down and get to the person faster. So that's what we want to be watching. And it's another reason why it's so important to have people stationed where they can see at the top and the bottom if you can, to watch the avalanche and look for those clues to help in the rescue. Um, and if you're that person caught in the avalanche, um, it can seem, relentless, but you want to try and actually swim. It doesn't always work, but if you want to think of getting on your back and floating or pulling your airbag, you want to try and keep yourself buoyant and above and fight. You can backpedal. You can try, if you can stay on top of the snow. There are cases people can just stay on top of the snow. If you feel yourself going under though, if you can, try and grab your pack strap and you can put your elbow like this to help form an air pocket. Because one thing that happens, the reason people can survive in an avalanche for up to 18 minutes or 20 minutes and have a good chance of survival till then is because the snow actually has air in it. There's tons of pore space and you can get air through it, but the trouble is the heat and moisture from your face start to form an ice shield around your face, and then it starts to cut off new oxygen. You don't actually die from suffocation. You usually die from asphyxiation, which means breathing carbon dioxide that you breathe out. So if you grab your pack and you can do this, this gives just a few more minutes of space and it prevents some of the snow from melting. Or you can beat your head back and forth to try and get an air pocket. Or anyway, it can increase your chances. It's not going to guarantee it. These are things you can remember. Um, if you do have an airbag, you want to pull it as soon as you can, but you guys don't have those, but still if someone has it, or maybe you get it in the future. And then it's slightly out of order, but if you do have the chance and if you the avalanches happen and you're still like upright, especially on your skis or your board, if you've stopped and you've identified the terrain and you've identified the ways to take out the escape routes, you want to head for that and almost straight line. Just get out of the way of the avalanche. If you're in a steep couloir with rocks, you might not have a way out. That's complex avalanche terrain. However, if we're in simple and challenging terrain, there should be trees and glades, so you can shoot out. If you can get out of the way, that's great. If you can get your feet downhill as well, that can help. Just like in a river, if you've gone rafting, if you fall off a river, get your feet beneath you so you can bounce off trees or rocks if they get towards you. Um, if you're not moving too fast and especially a tree you can grab it and see if you can hang on to stay there and let the avalanche go below you. Um, if you are caught, you want to ditch your poles, and that's one thing. If you're in avalanche terrain, you wouldn't want to have your ski straps on. Like if they're on your poles, that's fine. And if you're hiking up and you're not an avalanche terrain, sure, have your pole straps on. But if you're crossing that path, once you've identified the avalanche terrain, you make sure those pole straps are off because they can help drag you down. Even just like if you're skiing and you have your strap on and you fall the wrong way, you can trap your arm down and you can't get out of it. And your skis, you want to kick those off because they can drag you down. Snowboards, you can't really do that. But on skis and poles, you can. And then as the avalanche starts to slow down, that's when if you're totally buried, you can feel it. Really try and beat your head back and forth because you can make an air pocket while the avalanche is still moving. But once that snow stops, it almost sets up like concrete. So that's why it's real important. And this is all happening, like all these steps here, 1 to 10. These are all happening in like less than a minute usually. But it's a lot. But it can make a difference of survival in there. Um, try and get that air pocket if you can, and stay calm. Like once you've fought hard and you're not on the surface anymore, just try and stay calm and save your breath to make the most of those last 18 minutes you might have for your friends to come and get you. They've got a diagram here. And this gets into more detail of what you can do depending on where you are. in the avalanche and how it moves. Here's like the breakup area here. It's moving. There's the crown. Um, if you've watched some of the videos, you'll see when the slab starts, it's one big piece, but then as it moves a couple of feet, then it breaks up. That's the breakup area. Then you get when it's flowing and in the big waves. And then you get into the deposition zone where everything piles up, and it's really deep here once you get down to the bottom of the avalanche where the debris pile is. Oh, another thing I forgot. Yeah, you could, if you can try and punch a hand up in the air, if you can tell which way is up, you can push your hand up. At least that can help maybe have people find you. That's another thing of looking out for clues. Like maybe if you're a spotter and you've watched someone get caught in an avalanche and you see a glove, like you want to go check it because maybe there is actually a hand there and maybe that's the person. And avalanche rescue, it's the one thing where when we train you, we're going to be really anal how to use the beacons and do all these parts of the search. But however, in real life, you're allowed to cheat if the cheating is appropriate. Like if you see a hand moving, if you know one person's in the avalanche, and you can see a hand sticking up and moving, go straight to the hand and dig him out. You don't need to bother with the beacons and stuff. As long as the avalanche is it's safe to go in there, you can go straight to them and cheat, and you don't have to do all the parts. But all the parts of avalanche rescue, which we'll get into, we need to practice a whole lot to be better to use them when we need to. Let's see. Okay. Any questions on that stuff? I'll take sounds as a no. So now probably our last subject for the night. And thanks for bearing with me. It's actually been another hour. Does anyone need another few minutes break or anything?
I'm good.
I think we can power through.
All right, let's power through. Um, so uh, one thing that happens we've talked about the terrain and what to do in an avalanche, but the funny thing is now that we're getting into snowpack and weather, snow falls from the sky, right? And it's got these little fingers, these classic snowflakes like you cut out as a kid in elementary school to make snowflakes for Christmas decorations. Snowflakes fall from the sky. However, once they get on the ground, they don't stay snowflakes. They actually change in place. Um, and that's in short due to this. This is a good diagram. And it has to do with how deep the snowpack is and what the different temperatures are in the air. So in short, you can basically assume that the ground is always 0 degrees of Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. It's always at freezing level, right at freezing level. However, like we all know, especially in Colorado, you can even see on my screen thing, it's 2 degrees C, -2, so it's a little bit below freezing in Steamboat. So the temperature of the air is less than freezing. Right now it's not a lot, but it can be -10, -30 up here. And what that does is when it causes a temperature gradient through the snowpack, and if it's more than a certain amount, if the temperature change is more than 1 degree Celsius per 10 centimeters of snow depth, we have a strong temperature gradient, and that means those snowflakes and crystals, they're actually transforming in place into those things called facets. You heard me touch on those earlier. We'll do that more in the field. But a facet, it's basically like a card. Instead of a snowflake with arms that can stick together and be cohesive, facets are like little squares in decks of cards, and they don't have any bonding together, and they can handle a lot of pressure straight down, but just like a deck of cards, if there's any sort of lateral force, they can snap, and that's what makes a deep layer. And in Colorado, we have quality snow. It's really nice and dry, but it's not that deep. It's only 4 to 6 feet deep usually, compared to the Northwest and maritime places where they get 10, 20 feet of snow on the ground. And the prime example is like here in November and December, it snowed a little bit, so we had 2 to 3 feet of snow. But then it didn't snow for a very long time, and especially over Christmas, there was a 2 or 3 week period. It was extremely cold at night. We had no new snow, and there was only 2, 3 feet of snow. So it was very cold, and that caused a strong temperature gradient, and it caused the snow that was there to metamorphose into facets. And that's now a weak layer. And then we got all the new snow starting in early January. That was our strong cohesive snow on top of that old faceted weak layer. And basically, that old faceted weak layer, it's there all the time. That is our persistent slab. That's what's causing that persistent weak layer. And there's a whole lot more variation to this. You can get other weak layers in the snowpack. But it's important to remember that in Colorado, this is how, when we see that persistent slab, which is basically always here in Colorado, that's how that formed. It's because we have a shallow snowpack and really cold temperatures that change that snow in place. And it takes weeks, if not months, for those buried weak layers to go away, for that persistent slab, hence the name persistent slab. It's just there all the time. It doesn't go away. As where a wind slab might go away in a few days or a week. A storm slab, a few days or a week, it's gone, but not the persistent slab. Because not many people realize that the snow actually changes in place. Now another crazy thing is that even though we can dig all these pits and do all these layers, when you dig a hole in one spot, 10 feet over, it might be entirely different. And another reason why it's so important to just go one at a time is just because 10 people ski a slope does not mean it's safe whatsoever. It's the biggest misconception. People go, oh, well, we've skied here 20 years and that slope never slides, even though it's over 30 degrees. It's still avalanche terrain. And so many times there are people getting caught in avalanches and they're locals and they say, well, we've skied that for 10 years. We've never seen it slide. That does not mean it won't. And it's that one time when you hit it at this one sweet spot at this one specific time, that's when you get caught in an avalanche. And this is a good video here. We'll watch this again. It's pretty short, but you can see we've got 3 tracks already. This is a fourth, or sorry, that's the 5th person coming down on this slope. Here's a 6th person. And then here's a 7th person in between all the other tracks. And look, this guy caused an avalanche, even though he was the 7th person on the slope. So that's why it's so important and why we can't emphasize enough traveling one at a time an avalanche terrain after we've identified. And the key thing is we got to identify it to know it's there and then go one at a time. Let's watch that again for a sec. There's a point in this when you can see those different parts where the slab starts and then it breaks up and the guy's on top for a while. Coming down, having a great day here. So you can see here, do you see, here's the top of the crown, almost the whole way across this slope. The slab is still there and it's still one giant slab. And then in a few seconds, here it starts to break up in all the different chunks. And you see the guy's still actually on top there. He's very lucky, he's still on top, but even this guy stays afloat. What are all these things right here? These are trees, or another terrain trap. If this avalanche takes this guy and slams him through all these trees, maybe he stays on top, but maybe he gets impaled by a tree branch or something, or he get wrapped around the upside of a tree and have a ton of snow pushing against him and break his back. That's why we always want to remember these things, identify the terrain and the hazards before we get out on there.
Would the forecast for that slope change now that it's already slid? Like, are you able to use previous avalanches?
It's a good question. It depends on the situation, and it can depend it entirely depends on the situation. For the most part, we would say no, but we'll get more into this in the field. But it is possible, but that's where we need to know how many weak layers there were. And sometimes the avalanches may break all the way to the ground. So if the avalanche is broken all the way, like literally slid on the ground and you like see grass, and there's no hang fire cornices, if the avalanche broke all the way to the top of the slope, in that case, sure, there's no snow, it's all gone, but you wouldn't want to ski it either. Or if there was only one weak layer and you identified that the avalanche went on the lowest weak layer, because sometimes there's multiple weak layers. Even now we have the wind slab problem and then we have the persistent slab problem. Say a wind slab went and it was only 2 or 3 feet deep, and there's 6 to 8 feet of snow, that wind slab goes, but there's still 5 or 6 feet underneath. That persistent slab is still there, so not necessarily. And in fact, in that case, if you have a small wind slab go and there's a persistent slab underneath, it may now be easier to trigger the persistent slab because there's less snow covering it up, and the deformation bulb as you ski or ride can trigger easier. So it depends on the situation. But it is a super good question, right? At least it's one thing to ride it, but to do a rescue, like for the most part, before doing a rescue, you want to make sure the scene is safe, just like when you do first aid. Before you rescue anyone, is it safe to go rescue? Like, don't run into a burning house. If you're not prepared for burning house, and if you're trying to determine if it's safe to do a rescue or not, usually what you want to look for is if there's any hang fire. A lot of times when there's an avalanche, you'll get these big blocks that were the top of the avalanche that are still kind of sitting up at the top. They're slightly detached, but they didn't slide down. If you see those, it still would be very dangerous to go in to do a rescue. They could release at any second. They're really unpredictable. But if you look up and the avalanche went all the way to the top of the slope, and there's no hang fire, and you're not beneath another avalanche path in that multiple overlapping avalanche path scenario, then it could generally be safe. Um, but it all depends on the situation and the snow of the day. Does that make sense? But does that help understand the factors that you need to evaluate if it is?
Yeah, definitely.
Great. Yeah, and this, especially because you are all doing that rescue class too. This is where we really dive a lot into that stuff for when and not to do a rescue. Let's see.
And so the eight scale is based on kind of aspect and slope, and so that will never really change, right?
Good question. Let's go there. Just because great segue. Yeah, if you wanna, let's see. Can I zoom in on this? This is actually the eighth scale. There's all sorts of factors here. You can see, um, everything that they take in to make the maps. These are all the different parts. It's actually a scientific thing. They look at the exposure, the slope angle, the forest density, the slope shape, terrain traps, the frequency, if it's a well-known area and they have a history of how often the avalanches happen, the starting zone and its size, the characteristics of the runout zone, like is it a flat field or is it going to a canyon, and the different options. These are all the factors that go into it. But again, you're all just this is your first avalanche class. Like if you're into this stuff, which you are, feel free to read this and go into detail. Um, but the key things are between this simple, challenging, complex are the ones we hear about most. There is a no avalanche terrain rating, but it's very hard to ever say there will never absolutely be an avalanche unless it's just dead flat, and extreme terrain. But the thing of it, like green, is if you're a skier or a snowboarder, it's not entirely flat, but it's kind of flat and mellow, um, and really easy. Lots of trees. Challenging, there might be one or two little pockets or little rollers where there might be a small avalanche path, but then complex is multiple overlapping avalanche paths. Those the things that are in bold here. They when someone's trying to make these maps, they automatically bump it up to a certain level if you see the stuff in bold. Um, so did that answer that or avoid that question, Eden? I was trying to simplify it for you.
Yeah, I think I get the gist. I mean, it's always going to be a complicated answer. So,
Yeah. Unless you have one of these maps that does it all for you, or unless you have, um, if you have the eights layer in Onyx, that's what these maps are even better for people with no training or little training, so they can just see, oh, we want a snowshoe and not be in avalanche danger. Let's go on the green. But the the terrain doesn't change though. The terrain is always the terrain, if it's avalanche terrain or not. Doesn't change over time. What changes is the snowpack. The snowpack on top of it, and the avalanche danger forecast. You apply that to the avalanche terrain exposure scale. That help or start it? I just make it confusing.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but terrain it stays the same. It doesn't change. So if it's simple terrain today, it's simple terrain tomorrow, and it's simple the next day and the day after. And even if you don't want to use the H terms, you can go by the slope angle in general. It's just the H rating system. If you have a map of it, it takes where is it gone? It takes into account more than just the slope angle. It takes in some other factors as well. Um, you can see here like class 2 terrain, moderate angle, less than 30 degrees. It's open, graded terrain, and with some open slopes greater than 35 degrees. Below angles like, hey, it's all less than 20 degrees. Um, dense forest areas or openings without runout zones or slopes. Um, complex terrain is moderate to high angle terrain. with a large proportion of open slopes above 35 degrees and some isolated glades or tree bands. So it's saying complex is kind of a more percentage above tree line. With this eights, it can depend on how you measure it. Imagine that if you're trying to evaluate, this blob, are you trying to rate that whole area as green for simple or blue for challenging or complex? Are you evaluating it this big? It depends on the scale you're trying to measure it and rate it at. And you can also rate routes and lines. That's one thing Onyx does too, is you can click here. Here's an approach route, and they're saying should have the eights rating in here somewhere. Yeah, here they have the rating for this one particular route. There's areas and polygons, but then there's a route. If you're sticking to one specific path, they're calling this route challenging. As where you can also make it in polygons. Like say you just want to call this whole big face like one run, ski anywhere on that. It's depends on how you're measuring it too. So the real advantage of eights is once someone's gone through and done maps and routes and lines, which we have closer to Denver, but we don't have those up here yet in Steamboat yet. At least, can you see the potential?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed when I was looking at it the other day that just east of Steamboat, the actual resort has some of it up there. Um, maybe I had another layer in there, but I thought there was a little bit up, at least in that range there.
Yeah, here at Buffalo Pass, it's gonna generate here in the second. Here in Buffalo Pass, this is where Steamboat Powder Cats runs. So here's the resort.
Mm.
So yeah, we do have it here. We're not going there where we're up where we're going is up in North County up there. But yeah, here over Buffalo Pass, they do have it done. And they just tend to generate these where there's the most people. So this is
Sweet.
a popular sled skiing area. Um, yeah, but you can see here's Fish Creek. Like Fish Creek, you can every year there's accidents of people getting lost and injured in Fish Creek. And oh look, it's challenging and complex and even extreme avalanche terrain all in Fish Creek. And here's the falls. The falls are actually like right in here. Here's the trailhead going down. Here's the falls right there. Yeah. So yeah, we do have it near here, but not. We have it right here for this part of Steamboat. They don't have it for rabbit ears though. Rabbit ears would be mostly simple terrain because it's mostly flat. But again, we can interpret that by turning on the slope angles and okay, here's I-70 and here's some obvious steep terrain right here, but here not I-70 but Highway 40. There's barely anything very steep here. There's a little bit right here. Here's some steep stuff. Or up here, this is Walton Peak. There's a few bits of steeper terrain, but overall, you go everything. And if you wanted to rate this visual of the screen, even without an official eights layer, you can obviously there's barely anything over 30 degrees, and there's tons of ways around it. So you can say in general, Rabbit Ears Pass is simple terrain. There's lots of options and places to go. It might be boring for some skiing, but it's safe from avalanches. There's always a trade-off.
Sweet. So, like, unless there was like, some small features that might not show up here, even on like an extreme day, it'd be safe to go out there and ski something like this right here.
Yes, exactly. Now you're getting it in. That's why for snowmobilers, Rabbit Ears Pass is insanely popular. It gets a ton of snow, and it's basically flat. Near the parking lots right here, it's really dead flat. You would be on a snowboarder, you couldn't move because it's that flat. But for a snowmobiler, this is epic fun times. You can go out there. It can be an extreme danger day with 4 feet of new snow, and you can just go nuts all over the place for the most part and not worry about it, except in certain isolated spots. Um, yeah, that's where it comes into play. The simple trains where you want on the extreme days, especially and as skiers, you trying to skiers and snowboarders though naturally for fun want to go to avalanche terrain. Like 30 to 35 degrees is that's the good combination of a fun run, not too steep, to slide, and that's what skiers and snowboarders want to get to, as our snowmobilers maybe want to do that or not. The snowmobiler can have a great time in a flat field on a powder day, have the snow going over your helmet and everything. It's so amazing. But yeah, that's where our human factors play into what we want to do for the day. And if you start to think snowmobiler versus skiers kind of always want the steeps, but snowmobilers can go either way. They can just go to the flats. That's where, if it's 4 feet deep powder and you're on a split board, you're gonna hate it, right? Because you can't move.
Yeah. So, kind of using the resort as a reference, you were talking earlier, like, the chutes and some of mahogany, but excluding those, the resort is pretty bomber. You would say, like, if it was a backcountry, not actually in bounds, you'd say most resort is relatively safe, correct? Just trying to get like an idea of like what slopes uh would work.
Sure. Yeah, here, and you're talking Steamboat Resort, not Loveland,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, Steamboat.
Well, no, this is a good question. Look, like, let's have a look. So, there's no eights layer on the resort. It's out there. But I have the slope angle. I've turned on the slope angle. Um, and even without slope angle shading, you can still, if you can read a topo map, when the lines get closer together, it's steeper. But the slope angle shading just makes it deeper, and we can look. Here is here's the Morningside Park lift. If you can see my mouse moving, here's
Yep.
Morningside Park. So yeah, here at Morningside Park, like at the very top, right beneath the chair, that's just barely avalanche terrain there. If you go a little bit around, um, it gets steeper. This would definitely it'd be a small avalanche path, but this is definitely a small patch of avalanche terrain. However, Morningside Park or Boringside Park is relatively safe. You could get a little bit in the trees here, but still, there's still tons of space in this bowl. However, when you get off Morningside Park, remember the chutes, they even have them labeled here. Chute 1, 2, and 3, straight through the avalanche terrain. And over here, the whole thing,
Yeah.
um, to this side of Mount Warner, this is all definitely avalanche terrain. And you can see here, like these lines, there's no way, if you're at the top of Mount Warner, the only way down without going through avalanche terrain, if you wanted to fully, say this was the backcountry, you wanted to fully avoid it, you'd need to go down this ridge. You could ski the ridge, or you could ski
And
down this ridge. But even if you went down this one, you still got to cross to get out here.
that ridge to the west or the east there, that's where that little side country gate is that correct? Are you familiar with that one?
I know they have one at the bottom here. I think there's one at the bottom, and I do think there's another one here. I don't think East Faced is in bounds.
Yeah, we've poached a couple of those out of side country laps. And we're just trying to see, how safe those are. Generally.
Yeah, I'd say, this, especially this East Face one, if you're down in here, this will be some steep stuff. It's not big, but that's the deception. Oh, it's not that big, but it's a small piece of avalanche, and you still really need to worry there and try and stay off of that and surely go one at a time. Or, don't do it unless it's low danger.
Gotcha.
Coming down, if you're coming down through here and go like looping back.
But let's say like, if we're planning a route going up and over that ridge and then skiing down and around to the bottom of Morningside would probably be a relatively safe route in that scenario. Let's say you're at the top there. Yeah, right there. Would that be your line?
To come down this ridge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be on any given day, regardless. Staying on this ridge, coming down this way. You need to watch out for these little pockets. Those are the ones that could get you. Even these little ones, I'd still stop and go one at a time. But there's also ways around it. But yeah, this would be the safer line to come down around this way.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you.
Sure, and the big contrast is here's Fish Creek. Like Fish Creek, just accidents and lost people all the time. You can
Yeah.
zoom in here. That's Fish Creek, and here's Mahogany. But now this is the hike back, I think, right? This is now
Mm-hmm.
they don't have the hike back in. Yeah.
Cool.
Sure. Let's do one more thing. We will cover beacon checks and rescue. We're gonna real get hands on with that. But one other thing that's real subtle, we'll touch, and then we can just end for the night if you're all stoked, is our human factors. And these are things that can influence where we want to go. And an even more subtle thing is still, if you're just a skier in a snowboard, we're always thinking we always want to go, we want to slide, we want to turn. So we want to go where it's, at least over 25 degrees on a snowboard so you can slide on a powder day. But uh, there's different factors affecting us. And one of is where do we want to go for fun? Like, and that's the difference of a snowmobiler can have a grand old time in a flat field on a powder day. But that human factor of like what is our motivation? Because still avalanche terrain is avalanche terrain, but our motivation to go into it can change depending on what you're doing. Um, as one thing that's not mentioned too much. But then also we've got these things called heuristic traps, which there's 6 of them. We've got familiarity, acceptance, commitment, the expert halo, tracks, and scarcity. And these are all different things that could force us to make a bad decision. And for skiers, um, scarcity is one of the biggest ones. Like, the resort gets tracked out first. You don't own a snowmobile and you don't own skins. Well, then if you want to get fresh tracks, your thing is to use the gates and go out of bounds usually. Which I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but remember that what's forcing you to make that decision, like say it's an extreme powder day and Kyle drove up from Denver and there was traffic on I-70. You didn't get here till noon, so all the fresh tracks in the resort are gone, and you came all this way, and it's your last chance to ski for the season. You want to get those fresh tracks, but it's also a high avalanche danger day. Don't let that force you into making a bad decision in avalanche terrain. It doesn't mean don't go in the backcountry, but like say you want to go out that gate and get some fresh tracks, make sure you still have a beacon, shovel, and probe. Like don't leave the gate without a beacon, shovel, and probe. Not necessarily your skins to get back, but if you want to take that line we talked about still, because it's the easiest line, there's still patches of avalanche terrain in there, those small ones that are harder to identify. Those are the ones that are going to get you. It's not the big ones, but have your tracks and go out there, but pick that safer line. Don't just charge into the steeper dangerous line. Remember that motivation and keep yourselves in check. It's hard to do because we all love powder, we want to get it. um some other things are, say you've done your avalanche level 1 and then you want to impress some locals that have snowmobiles and you want them to take you sled skiing on Buff Pass, and you see them in a resort. Don't do anything silly to impress someone else to exceed the danger. Or you say you hike up Buffalo Pass, and you've grueled for 6 hours to get up where a snowmobile can get in 20 minutes, and you meet these people and you want to do this hard line and impress them, but it's a bad avalanche danger day. Don't do that. Dial it back. Don't let these things trick you into making a bad decision. Or familiarity is one where that really gets a lot of experienced backcountry skiers or locals, that especially if locals only ski one area. It's one thing to know an area well, but if you never go anywhere else, you don't notice the variations. That's when people get like, we skied that line for 10 years. I've never seen it slide. Well, you still weren't there every day of the year. Maybe it slid a day you weren't there and then it got snowed over it. If anything is over 30 degrees, it can possibly avalanche. Even if it hasn't slid for 10 years, if it hasn't slid for 20 years, it can still go. And you want to treat it as avalanche training. Go one at a time and have your group management in there. That's the familiarity heuristic. The commitment heuristic is that more applies like a 14er trip or a hut trip where like you have to get to that place. Like you've waited all season or all spring for the conditions to go climb Quandary or something and ski down, and you have to get to the top, and you're motivated to get there, and you really just your day is that you consider your day a failure if you don't get to the top. Try not to have that. Be like, hey, sure, you want to try and ski Quandary. Let's try and go on this day. But if the conditions are bad, don't let that force you into taking extra risk because that's your only day. It's okay to turn around. If people are giving you shit because you didn't make the top of 14, or maybe they're not your friends or they're dangerous, it's always okay to turn back. Um, you know, or another thing where this commitment is like, say you're doing a hut trip. Maybe you guys haven't yet because you don't have your AT gear, that you own it yet, but it is cool to do hut trips. But if you do loops, that's where you leave from one spot and you hit 3 huts and you come back a different way, not just going to one and coming back. You may be in the middle of that trip and you may have to get to that hut because there's 20 people that came in behind you and that hut's occupied and full, and you've got to get to the next one. Um, and that's always it's always a tough call. Well, we've got to cross this one slope. Is it safe to cross it or isn't it? And maybe you don't have a forecast. You haven't gotten a forecast for 3 days because you're out of range. But you've got to get there, or you've got to go back and beg forgiveness from the people at the last hut to have them let you stay there because it's still not another 8 hours from that hut back to the car, and it's 2 p.m. and you don't have time to do that. So that's when you need to weigh up your commitments and what are the other options. And skiing a 14er, it's obvious you can just turn around and go back, but on the hut trips especially, it can throw a lot of people off. um Another one of these heuristics is the expert halo. That's one thing I've noticed a lot in the backcountry is people tend to follow and gravitate towards the fastest hiker who may or may not have any avalanche education. Just because someone runs up the hill fast because they did 3 laps already doesn't mean they know anything. They may as well, but you know, just because someone knows a route or like a local doesn't mean it's necessarily safer. And I can't emphasize enough. I keep going. If you identify that avalanche terrain, treat it as avalanche terrain and manage it. Go one at a time and manage your group like that. Just because someone's been there, if you recognize it's over 30 degrees, it is avalanche terrain. And don't let anyone trick you into not just by saying, "Oh, I skied for 10 years. It doesn't go. It doesn't slide." That doesn't mean it won't ever. In fact, when people usually say, "Oh, it never slid for 10 years," that's when the accident happens. Is after 10 years, you need that one combination of people and the snowpack and the weather on that aspect, and you get an avalanche. Whew, my voice is wearing out. And has this been a good review? I know it's not exactly organized, but it's kind of trying to review the weak points and go over the important things and save other stuff for the snow. Do you guys have any questions, or can I see your faces for the last 5 minutes and say goodbye? Yay, there you are.
Yeah, no, everything seems pretty clear. Excited to get out there.
Great. Oh,
I'm excited to get out there too.
great. Well, we're stoked. And did I give you the meeting place yet for Friday?
No.
Okay,
I think in one email, maybe. Could you send it again?
yes, and I'll show you on a map here anyways. But yeah, I can email it. I know Colin and Kyle have been to the Steamboat Lake Outpost already. So
Is
this
it that arena?
the marina will be Saturday for our second day. We'll meet at the marina, and for Sunday for the rescue class, we'll meet at the marina. For now, but actually, so far for day one for Friday for you guys, we're gonna meet at the visitor center. Do you know the Steamboat Lake Visitor Center?
Cool.
Yeah, we'll meet there. And that day, I'm actually taking. And you're gonna be with Anthony both days. He's taking y'all the first day, and then this first day I'll be there in the morning. But then there's a different group that's coming for one day for like a refresher class. I'm taking them, but we're still gonna go from here. Um, unless I say otherwise. Sometimes the weather or just whatever reasons may change. But we're gonna start here at the visitor center, and then there's bathrooms, and this is the one place we have phone reception. I'm here. This
And, we bring a lunch and like sunscreen layers and whatnot. But what else? What else do we need to bring?
Well, yeah, all the stuff for the day: lunch, backpack, beacon shovel probe, your split board or your AT skis, your gloves, hat, goggles. We'll leave the parking lot, and we'll probably be out on the snow for anything from 4 to 6 hours that day. But then by 3, we'll do a more advanced planning session with these maps back at the outpost. So our current plan is to be back here at the outpost by 3, and they've got a little room we use to do class. So we'll do that in the afternoon, and we'll go through the maps and have you guys plan some routes of where we're going for the next day.
Cool.
Yeah, but yeah,
So, should we bring a helmet too?
on the second day for sure. It can just be a ski helmet, but yes, we do need you to have some form of helmet to ride the snowmobile as a passenger. You're not
Okay.
towed behind the rope. You're not hanging on the sides. And basically we're gonna ride on a groomed trail. It's gonna be big and wide. However, we are in Northwest Colorado. It may not have been groomed for a few days. It may have snowed, so it can't be bumpy. We do need you to have a helmet on the first day. That's like your personal choice. honestly, the first day you can see from this map, it's flat. We're not going far. It's a lot of theory. There's some steepness here. We get our theory out of the way the first day, so you don't really need your helmet, but it's your choice. And then
Okay.
the second day,
And what time are we meeting again? 8?
oh geez, what time did I say? I thought it was 8:30. Let me check.
Okay.
Where is my email? Let's see. Here, did I might not have said yet. We're at 6 p.m. tonight. There's a Zoom. I do know for Sunday, because I've been emailing, there's more people coming Sunday. That's 8:30 at the marina. But for you guys, yeah. We'll do 8:30 at the visitors center. And you want me to email that now too, so y'all remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Here, I'll do it right now. 3:21.
And we'll probably finish up at the outpost like 5 or 5:30, you think?
Oh yeah, by 5 for sure. Yeah. So if we need to get anywhere or do anything. I'll finish typing this out with a map link, but I'll send that so the Olivia and Anthony know, and I'll be there. You can ring. I think all of you guys have talked to me on the phone, so you can ring me or text. We do have limited phone range there. It should work, but you never want to count on it out here. But yeah, we'll just meet there with all your stuff, and usually our first day we'll be in the parking lot. We're gonna go over things like trailhead checks. Those should have been in the online learning, and some beacon theory for like the first half an hour. We'll talk about the forecast there, and then I'll probably do all that with the other group as well, and then we'll split up. You'll go with Anthony, and he'll cover like rescue, and we'll look at snow pits and snow layers, and a variety of a lot of theory things and basic like slope angle identification. And then like it's a lot of theory and talking and understanding. Then that second day we really charge and try and get a lot of as much vert as you can. And on that second day we snowmobile and then you hike from there.
Cool.
Does that sound good?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, is there anything else or should we call it a night?
I think it sounds good for now.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
Great. All right, everybody. And just do remember every day you need beacon shovel probe and your uphill gears, split board skins, helmet, optional first day, mandatory second day to ride to be a passenger. But you are going to be sitting on the back on a seat in the snowmobile. If you see other people towing on ropes, and that we do think that's okay, but remember we're kind of a class. We don't know everyone. That's why everyone will be seated on a seat on the snowmobile. We can actually fit 3 people on each of these snowmobiles. So I'll drive one with 2. Probably the 2 smallest people will go with me, and then everyone else will go with Anthony on the other one. Yeah. So,
Great.
okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks so much. Really
Sure.
appreciate it.
Good night, everyone. We'll see you on Friday. And email if there's or call if there's anything else.
Yeah, thanks,
Okay.
Lee.
Yeah. Thanks, Lee. Bye.
Bye.